Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs?
What's up, what's up?
My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. I am so hyped. We get to watch the Bills and the Dolphins in a huge divisional matchup tonight.
That should be a fun game, dude. Because both these the Bills defense used to be good, but it looked like buns on Sunday, and it was kind of buns last year. So Bills kind of have a crappy defense,
This should be a fun game, huh?
Dolphins don't have like an elite defense either, so it should be relatively high scoring.
Offense. We need some fantasy points scored in this game. Not gonna lie, but I'm excited about it. I'm excited to watch football again. I'm hitting that point where I realize that like early in the season, when the season first starts, it's like everything all at once. You see Sunday, you see this year you had Friday night, you had Thursday night, and I was like, this is great. And now it's like this 4-day layover or 3-day layover before football. And I'm like, ugh.
And then we're going to have to sit Friday and Saturday.
For real. So I'm excited to watch football tonight, but we still got some business to take care of before we jump into week 2 and watch it. We got sit players this week. So these are guys you have to sit for week 2. Take them out of your lineup. Get them out. If you have some replacements here from the start show, be sure to check that one out. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, follow us on all social media platforms. Type in the FF Champs Fantasy Champions. You'll find us. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, just leave a review. Share this pod with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Click the bell for notifications. Leave a comment down below. Any of your start and sit questions for the week, we can give you some help there.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, Rick? You doing good?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for more football.
All right, let's do it. Let's talk football. All right.
Let's do it.
So these are players you have to sit for week 2, guys that we don't like going into this week. I do want to make a public apology for David Montgomery this past week. Rick told me that's risky.
You were, to be fair, you hit it perfect on the nail of the head until overtime.
Yeah, until he said, "Okay, Lions, get on my back."
If the game ended in regulation, I think he would have had like somewhere between like 7 and 8 points.
You know the funniest part about watching Montgomery play is that like it feels like he's like the only guy on the field, and you're like, "Where the hell's Gibbs?"
Because that's what they do.
But Monty had 49% of the snaps, so it's not even like Gibbs wasn't on the field.
Yeah,
they were giving full drives.
Gibbs had 51.
But yeah, you're right. Without the touchdown and like the 30 extra yards, he was kind of cooked.
Yeah, the overtime points.
Yeah.
He's the only guy that touched the ball in overtime. I think Gibbs had 1 carry in overtime. And then they didn't throw 1 pass.
I was so mad that game went to overtime, by the way. Ended up working out for me, but I was like, I'm suffering.
Yeah, because you were playing against Goff and Kyron.
I was playing against Goff and Kyron, so it was like every time any offense was on the field, there was no relief. It was just pain.
Sorry, Goff wasn't even that good.
No, he was not. 13 points. So I was very happy with that. All right, let's talk about the players you have to sit for week 2. Starting with the running backs and starting with Tony Pollard versus the New York Jets. Now, Pollard had a good week, Rick.
He did.
He had a good week this past week, but why are we telling you to start him against the Jets?
Well, we'll start off with this. The head coach after the game had a lot to say about the Titans, but one of the things he did say was that they wanted to give Tajay Spears more touches next week because he did not have a lot this week. I think he only had like 5 or 6 touches, and going into the season, they were saying that they're going to split in the backfield. He had 8 touches to Pollard's 19, so expect that to kind of even out a little bit. I do think Pollard will get more touches because he had a pretty good game.
Sure,
but it's not going. I don't see him getting 19 touches again. And against the Jets, who I know kind of got destroyed by the 49ers, but that is the 49ers, right? So against a team like the Titans, we saw their offense this week kind of crap the bed overall. I don't see the Titans putting up a lot of points on the Jets. Could also be a negative game script as well. which is just more negatives for Pollard. So
Mm-hmm.
I know he had a good week. You probably want to start him, but I think there are better matchups out there than Tony Pollard.
Yeah, for real. I think the other thing that is not flying under the radar, but kind of a tough situation for wow, why am I blanking?
Tony Pollard?
Yes, thank you, Tony Pollard. Jeez, I kept on thinking Spears, and I'm like, I'm gonna say Spears out loud. Anyway,
One of them.
Tony Pollard they're playing the New York Jets, and they didn't have a great week last week stopping the running game and fantasy points, but they have one of the most premium defensive lines in football with Quinn and Williams and all of those boys, and it's gonna be
He
tough.
did get cooked this week.
It's gonna be tough for Tony Pollard to run, especially with the way like Tennessee played last week. I know Pollard was efficient, but against a good defensive line and a good defense, it's going to be far more difficult for Tennessee to move the ball. And I think that Pollard's going to have less scoring opportunity and he's going to be less efficient. So it's going to be a real tough week for Tony Pollard to put up big fantasy points like he did last week. And like Rick said, if Spears does get more opportunity, that's only a negative for Tony Pollard. So you got this big 18-point game from him in PPR, but I think that'll definitely come down and you'll benefit from not starting him this week if you don't.
And the Bears have a good defense too, but Pollard also, I think he had like a 30-yard rushing touchdown. And then if it's hard to take those plays away, but like outside of that play, he didn't do too much. And now he's playing against an even better defense with potentially less touches.
Yeah, so sit Pollard. Number 2, Alexander Mattison at Baltimore. Now, Mattison was one of the waiver wire pickups.
Waiver wire darling.
Yeah, he was a darling this week. I didn't love him because like it's not a bad pickup, especially if you need running backs, and I probably need running backs on my fantasy team. But all the power to you with Alexander Mattison if you want to buy into that. He's going into his 6th year. He's on a bad football team that's not going to score a lot of points. So there's just not a lot of interest or intrigue for me to add a player like that. Even though it's not like a horrible ad, like I said, especially if you need running backs. But I do want to reference Zamir White got pretty much all of the rushing work for the team, like just on the ground, because Madison had 5 carries for 19 yards. And that is very gross, but just he didn't get much rushing. What he did get was pass catching opportunity with 4 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. So those were positives. I think the big thing with Alexander Mattison is that like I don't see him. This successful week was buoyed by a touchdown catch. And without that touchdown catch, like Rick said, you don't want to take those points away, but he only scores 7-8 fantasy points if he doesn't have that touchdown catch. So I think the big thing for me with Madison is that his stats are kind of inflated for not a whole ton of opportunity. I like the pass catching that he did get in the first game, but I just don't think he's going to have that much wiggle room and room to move against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, he might be okay rest of the season as potentially
he's got Carolina and
plug and play guy. Yeah. And I think he's like going to be in a split with Zamir White, which is very gross on the Raiders. But in a game like Carolina in week 3,
sure,
that could be a game where if you need to plug and play him, that's fine. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't do it this week. And I know there are some people out there very excited about Alexander Mattison. I don't know why. I do know why, but it's not for me. And I think it's Baltimore too, like you said, like tough matchup. A guy that had 5 carries last week and is in a split backfield and not a great offense. So it's not something that I would be excited about to start, even though I think the guy in our league who picked him up is probably going to start him this week, which I would just say good luck with that.
Yeah, definitely a sit this week. Let's talk about some wide receivers, though. Amari Cooper at Jacksonville. Give us
it back with Amari Cooper, who was at one of our sits last week.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, frick. All right, here we go.
I'm glad we're doing it, though. This is the point.
Let's go, Cooper. Let's
I'll tell you why.
Dump on Cooper Kupp.
Whoa.
Sorry, Amari Cooper, not Cooper Kupp. Don't dump
Amari
on
Cooper. All right, he was our sit last week against Dallas. Tough matchup.
Yeah.
And then we watched the game, and I don't know how much of the game you watched.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
It was really bad.
I mean, Deshaun Watson by how bad Brady was, but that's a side point.
And as long as Deshaun Watson is playing at that level, Amari Cooper should stay on your bench.
Yeah,
that's how I feel. Or if they switch, because I mean, you know who the backup quarterback is?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember. Is it Darian Thompson-Robinson?
It was, but they got somebody else before the season started.
That's bad that I don't even know who it is, though.
Jameis the famous
Oh,
Winston, baby.
yeah!
And if he comes in,
I feel
we're
better
throwing
about that.
bombs. But until they make a switch or Watson just somehow magically
around.
becomes Houston Deshaun Watson, which
Sure.
looks less likely every week that he plays, Amari Cooper, I'm not putting him in my starting lineup. He'd be on my bench every single week until something changes there. So playing against Jacksonville, Jacksonville's not necessarily a great or bad matchup. They're kind of middle of the pack, but to me, this play is more about Deshaun Watson and that Browns offense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because Cooper does put up really good performances, but Watson's just been so bad. And I actually kind of think it's sad that on Sunday, this is hot take time for Morgan, but he said that his father died and one of his friends died. And
that is tough.
That's more important than football, which totally agree, friend. But are you using the deaths of family and friend members to blame your performance?
It's also hard just to be.
It's like
you know, and
if you can't play, you tell the coaches.
Too,
like, what
so
are you doing?
Yeah.
So anyway, not great.
It is tough. It is tough.
So, but I hate that he was using his dead relatives to make an excuse for his poor play. Like, if you can't play, tell the coach you can't play.
It feels like because he's getting booed. He gets booed at home. He gets booed on the road. I don't know if he even wants to be out there anymore. I feel like he's kind of mentally
cashing a check.
Yeah.
Worst decision the Browns ever made was moving on.
Yeah, that legit.
That's so stupid.
I didn't mind the trade at the time because I liked Deshaun Watson.
And you thought Baker
Houston.
Was toast.
And Baker, looked okay, but kind of looked toast. But hindsight, that might be one of the worst trades in NFL history.
Yeah, especially the contract that they gave him too.
Right, which you have to add into it.
Yeah, that's bad. But so as long as, like Rick's right, as long as Amari Cooper as long as Deshaun Watson is total buns, Amari Cooper will probably be along with that. The only scenario where I see Amari Cooper kind of shocking a little bit is because he's playing Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's defense is not great. Their secondary is not great. So, like, if there's
they gave up some big plays this week, but I mean,
if there's
they overall played Miami pretty well on defense, outside of two big plays.
Yeah, that's fair. But I do think that there is something to the Amari Cooper age thing as well. Like, he's 30 years old. Like, he's gonna have weeks this year where he's really good, but I think there's decline, and this is why we didn't want to draft him in the preseason, because I think there's definitely decline coming for him. Now, he did have the 9 targets, but he didn't.
It's not just his age, because 30 to me isn't that bad for a receiver. It's
that's
he has a lot of wear and tear and injury history
as
well.
Age, so. Rick. Where did Julio Jones decline? 30.
He was 31, 32.
Yeah, it's about that.
I mean, Tyreek's 30.
Yeah,
and he's Tyreek.
And Reek's slowing down a little bit. Doesn't look as fast, which is still faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the next guys. Let's talk about a whole unit. This is a grouping. We're not going to talk about each guy individually, but the Packers wide receivers versus Indianapolis. This one's real simple. We don't have to spend hours on this one.
No.
Malik Willis is the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. That's about, and didn't think I was going to be saying that a month ago.
No.
But Jordan Love got hurt this past week. Thank God it's not a bad injury for him.
Yeah, seriously. I would have cried as I drafted him in the 8th round in our league.
And, but, I mean, what you saw from some of these guys, like Jaden Reed had a great week. Wicks, he had his opportunities, had a bunch of drops. And Christian Watson also had a touchdown catch. So, it looked like the receiving options and the running game was going to be.
I know. And it is a shame, too, because the Colts secondary isn't great. So this could have been a good matchup. Could have been a really good
matchup for all the Packers wide receivers. And I think what people are going to say is oh, I need to get these receivers on the field. I think this is probably better for Josh Jacobs than it will be for the Packers receivers, because they're probably going to run the ball a lot and ask Malik Willis to do very simple things. And it's going to mean that the receiving, so you look at how the Patriots played this past week and how their receivers scored fantasy point wise. That's probably what it's going to look like for the Packers. Maybe a little bit better, but I just think that there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for the Packers wide receivers to blow up and have success. So as much as you love Jaden Reed right now, it's tough, and it's tough to set him. It really is. If you have an extra flex spot at the end of the bench, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's tough to look at any of the Packers receivers this week and go, I like that.
Yeah. What are the odds Malik Willis throws 200 passing yards this week?
Not high, Bob.
Not high at all. I think he's probably gonna even like the dude might have like 120 yards passing this week. So you can't really start any receiver if he does that. And it stinks because you're right, because like Jaden Reed, you might not be able to set him after the week he had, and
Sure.
depending on who else is on your team. But I don't see a world where any of these Packers receivers really have a big week. So it's just gonna be a tough passing game, and they are gonna run the ball a lot.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about the quarterback sit of the week, which is Trevor Lawrence versus Cleveland. We go back to that Jacksonville-Cleveland game and take Trevor Lawrence. Now, Lawrence, I mean, hell, we don't know anymore. Like, I don't really know what to do with
It
Trevor
is so
Lawrence.
tough because did you see his touchdown pass?
Yeah, it was nice.
That thing was a thing of
It was a
beauty.
laser.
Yeah, he only threw the ball 21 times. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. But Cleveland's tough.
Cleveland's
a tough defense. That's going to be tough for him to score a ton of fantasy points and have a bounce back week, even if they give him more opportunity. So I'm kind of fading him this week, but I do think there could be a little bit more of a bounce back. It's just not going to be enough where it's like, okay, we can start him.
Yeah, I think he might be okay, but it's not going to be enough in fantasy to plug and play him.
Yeah. And Cleveland last week, I do want to check because I think they had a better.
They were getting torched by Dak in the first half.
They were getting, but that's the tough part is that they're playing the Dallas Cowboys, and they have one of the better defensive lines in football. So, it is tougher to look at that team and go because like you said, they kind of got torched by Dak, but it wasn't even that; it was just the running game. Because they still held Dak to 11 fantasy points.
Dak really didn't do anything though in the second half.
Yep.
So
we'll see what Trevor Lawrence.
They did a really good job against like Myles Garrett, and I don't think Jacksonville has the same kind of
firepower
ability. Not necessarily firepower, but maybe offensive line ability to stop Myles Garrett. Like he's probably going to destroy them.
Sure. Okay, Trevor Lawrence, sit him. The final guy is we're gonna go back to the well here. Rick's tight end start. Wow, I said start. Tight end sit of the week.
Yeah. It's the Muth, and I
love you, Muth.
The Muth is playing against Denver, and Denver did pretty good against the Seahawks this past week in the passing game. So they're pretty good against the pass, and as long as Justin Fields is the quarterback, I don't know how many big games you're going to get out of Pat Freiermuth, and I actually like Justin Fields. I think he's probably the better option for the Steelers than Russell Wilson. Not even probably, I think he is. But he's kind of like a one-read, two-read run type of quarterback at this point in his career, and how he's always been, really.
I would argue Pat Freiermuth is the second read.
Yeah, and he he had 4 targets this week against Atlanta, so not bad, but I think that's kind of, we're going to see a lot of that, like 4 targets, 4 catches, 27 yards was his line in week 1. And I don't know how much different that's going to be in week 2 unless he can get a touchdown, but he's playing against a tough matchup in Denver. So he'll have some weeks where he gets, a couple catches and a tutty, but he's going to be kind of touchdown dependent with the Steelers team.
Yeah. Last week, the Denver Broncos gave up 2 fantasy points to tight end position. Usually when the rest of your defense is kind of buns, you can stop the tight end, and that usually means that the outside receivers are getting a lot of work.
And the Steelers with Fields last week, 23 pass attempts, and I think Pickens had like 10 targets. So outside of like Pickens,
not great.
Pickens only had 7 targets actually. So I'll take a step back there, but still, there's not a lot of targets to go around in that offense.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, there you go. There's Rick's tight end sit of the week. There are all your sits for this week. We still got one more show to get to before we send you off to watch football this weekend. It is our trade target show. So guys, you have to go out and get in trades. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Enjoy football tonight. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.